session of ATCIO. Joining us is Shri Rajeev Chandrasekhar ji, a former IT minister, a key figure in a policy-making spheres and closely initiatives like DPDPA and setting up the roadmap for the India's digital Atmanirbhar. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I would like to start with you. Like you were closely involved with the DPDPA, and now with its draft, a section says a compliance, especially related to the parental consent, so has increased. What are your views on it?
No, I think that the Act is very clear about the fact that we believe that the personal data relating to children that many platforms do collect cannot be collected by just the child's consent alone. It should be consented to by the parent of the child. As you know, the fundamental feature of the DPDP Act is the consent. That means no platform in India or no platform dealing with the Indian citizen can use the personal data of a Indian citizen without the consent of the person whose personal data it is. So using that principle as a basic structure, as far as children go, it is not enough for a child to consent to his or her personal data being used. The child's parent must consent to the personal data of the child being used to prevent exploitation, to prevent profiling of children, which unfortunately many platforms have done in the past, and we certainly think that the DPDP Act will put a stop to.
Okay, absolutely. So for violations, like there is a provision of registration cancellation for consent managers, but there are no penalties which were proposed earlier. So your thoughts on this change?
So look, consent managers are also data fiduciaries. So if a consent manager, for example, you appoint a consent manager to manage your consent with a platform which is a data fiduciary, and the consent manager somehow also breaches your personal data, they will be liable to the same penalties under the DPDP Act like any other data fiduciary.
Okay.
So there is no need for a separate clarity on punishment or punitive consequences that the consent manager will have to undergo. So in a very simple scenario, if a consent manager takes your personal data with your consent or manages your consent with another platform and in turn breaches its database, breaches your personal information, the consent manager also under the Data Protection Board can be levied a punitive penalty that could be like any other penalty like any other data fiduciary is liable for.
Okay, very interesting to know. So several countries have expressed interest in India's digital public infrastructure, with some already deploying it. Do you think India can play a leadership role in the global south when it comes to new technologies?
Oh, absolutely. This is our Prime Minister's vision. From 2015, he has remained remarkably consistent about one point, which is that as India builds its innovation capabilities, as young Indians will develop more and more exciting products and solutions, and India evolves its DPI infrastructure, that India wants to make available those technologies at very affordable prices or even free of cost to countries who cannot afford to build their own innovation ecosystem. And during the G20, our Prime Minister made DPIs a part of the G20 declaration. And there is now what is called a G20 repository of DPIs, where India has made available all of its DPIs for any other country to take the entire stack or part of the layers of the stack free of cost. So India, and in November 2023, even in the GPA, the Global Partnership for AI Summit that the Prime Minister addressed, he said, we believe that technology is a very important thing for the future of the world and the future of India. But we also believe that technology should be inclusive and should be available to all the countries of the global south who may not be able to afford to develop it on their own. So it is a very important article of faith for India's tech strategy that India's DPI and India's tech and India's innovation is shared with the global south.
Very interesting to know this. So as India has embarked on an ambitious Atmanirbhar roadmap, do you think it's time to boost mobile components manufacturing with necessary initiatives schemes?
Look, I think this is an interesting question because in electronics manufacturing, India, which was completely absent prior to 2021, is today now creating a very significantly fast-growing footprint in the GVCs of electronics. Now, to become more and more competitive and add more and more value to the electronics ecosystem, the Prime Minister launched a semiconductor mission.
Yes.
And the semiconductors, as you know, are a very big part of the mobile or electronics product in general. Now, in addition to semiconductor, there are other components that go into a mobile phone or into any compute platform. Now, there is a good, healthy discussion going on whether there should be PLIs and there should be some incentives for us to manufacture components there. My own personal view is that we should be very clear about the strategic space that India wants to occupy. There is no point us manufacturing things that are going to be low cost, low margin, and have very low entry barriers, which every other country can do. But given that we are in semiconductors, we are in mobile phones, laptops, servers, what are the other critical components that India wants to become good at and India wants to increase its market share in, should be carefully identified, and the PLI should be directed there. So yes to component PLI, but to which components we have to be very, very careful. It should not be plain vanilla components which anybody can do, but it should be strategically selected, carefully determined where maximum value addition can be done in India.
Okay. So like in areas like AI and semiconductors, there is an apparent skill set gap in the country. What are the government's efforts in this direction?
Look, I can't speak on behalf of the government. I can certainly speak as somebody who has been in government and who is now very actively engaged with the ecosystem globally. There is a shortage of talent around the world. So, for example, US wants about 50 to 60,000 semiconductor professionals. Taiwan has repeatedly talked about wanting more and more talent for the semiconductor ecosystem. It is clear today, for example, the growing nature of the AI ecosystem, there are more and more requirements of talent. So for India, this is both a challenge as well as an opportunity. If we can create more and more talent from our educational and skilling ecosystems that are ready to deploy, and that can be used not just to grow the Indian ecosystem, that can use the Indian startup system, but also be globally deployed. That is the opportunity, and that is also the challenge. Now the challenge is very particularly our educational ecosystem is used to delivering degrees and not experience. Our education system our ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, takes degreed students or graduate students and then takes them to a training program to prepare them for deployment. Now, in the old world, this was okay because innovation cycles were 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So between one innovation and the second innovation, there was a gap of about 3 to 4 years. But today, those cycles have crashed to 6 months, 4 months. So therefore, there is no time available for somebody to take a degreed graduate student, then take them through 6 months of training, and then make them ready for deployment. So more and more, the challenge is for our education system to deliver ready to deploy talent. And that talent that can quickly adapt to the changing natures of the innovation ecosystem, which will change every 6 months, every 8 months, there will be a new disruption and they will require more talent. So it is an interesting challenge. It is also an opportunity, but it is, to be very sure, this is the same challenge that all the countries around the world are facing. We can see it, we can seize it as an opportunity as well. That is the difference in terms of India's perspective. That is that we don't necessarily see it only as a challenge, we also see it as an opportunity where Indian talent can become globally competitive and be globally deployed for the global majors in the coming years.
Okay. So like my last question, like for the coming 5 years or 10 years, how do you see like employment generation will go in this particular domain?
Look, in tech, there is going to be certainly disruption. What used to be the required skills 5 years ago are not going to be the required skills 1 year from now. In my time, if you were a great coder and a great programmer, that in itself, delivered the checks to you, that delivered your growth. But with AI today, code writing is not going to be as important because there are automatic code generators.
Exactly.
I was on a 14-hour flight, 16-hour flight to Brazil recently, and on the flight, I used ChatGPT to create a 8,000 line program for an operating system. So automatically, of course, it had bugs and it had some things to be corrected. But what were important skills 5 years ago are not going to be the important skills in the coming years. And so for the workforce, for those youngsters in the tech ecosystem, to be able to learn quickly, to be able to unlearn what you have learned and to relearn and uplearn and upskill yourselves very rapidly is going to be the determining factor between success and failure. As I love telling all youngsters that I meet, for the first time in the history of mankind, you are in a situation where you can never stop learning. Whether you're a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 25-year-old, if you are in the tech ecosystem, you must have the propensity and the ability to be constantly learning. You are a student all your life till you step out of the ecosystem and then retire. So being a student all your life is a very different thing from saying, I have finished my studies, I have got a job. Now it is not, I have finished my studies phase 1, I have got a job or I've started a company, and I will continue to learn phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. So learning is going to be a continuous cycle, and that is the new world that we live in. Disruptions are going to be more and more rapid. Once upon a time, Intel used to be the name for semiconductors, and today is NVIDIA. Maybe 5 years from now, it will be somebody else. So it is a totally, constantly changing, evolving landscape for which you have to be very nimble, and you have to constantly relearn and continue to learn.
Exactly. So thank you for sharing these insights, and it's been a pleasure discussing these critical topics with you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.
Keep watching ETCIO.